Have you ever witnessed injustice unfold right before your eyes? Picture this: a black CEO, Marcus Reynolds, boards Elite Airways Flight 347 to San Francisco, expecting first-class service. But what happens next will shock you. The moldy sandwich lands on Marcus's first-class tray with deliberate contempt as Claire Wilson's lips curl into a satisfied smirk. The distinguished CEO watches her performance with measured calm, his finger discreetly activating the airline surveillance system he had commissioned as part owner of Elite Airways. Behind the curtain, Claire's whispered slurs about how these people didn't belong in first class, recorded perfectly. Each word cementing her fate, while Marcus documents the treatment with patient precision, his calculated silence as he presses the call button again carrying more threat than any confrontation could. Not anger, but quiet resolve that would transform this ordinary flight into the most devastating miscalculation of Claire's career. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe to Dark Threads. Marcus Reynolds adjusts his custom-tailored suit jacket as he settles into Seat 2A of Elite Airways Flight 347 to San Francisco. The supple leather first-class seat embraces him with the familiar comfort he had come to expect from his frequent travels, a small luxury he allowed himself after 20 years of building Reynolds Technologies from the ground up. As other passengers board the aircraft, Marcus pulls out his tablet and opens an email containing the quarterly performance reports for Elite Airways, the airline he partially owned through a silent investment partnership he had established 3 years prior.
Good afternoon.
A flight attendant greets the silver-haired gentleman across the aisle, her voice warm and inviting.
Welcome aboard, Mr. Whitman. May I offer you a glass of our signature champagne before takeoff?
Marcus observes the interaction from his peripheral vision while continuing to review the impressive revenue figures on his screen. Elite Airways had experienced a 15% growth in the premium travel segment under his strategic guidance, though few employees knew of his involvement beyond the boardroom. He preferred it that way, experiencing the airline as any other customer would, gathering insights that quarterly reports and customer surveys could never truly capture. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Claire, moves efficiently through the cabin, distributing hot towels and champagne flutes to the passengers in the first few rows. Marcus notices her warm smile fade slightly as she approaches his seat, her eyes flicking momentarily to his dark complexion before settling somewhere just above his shoulder. "Towel?" she asks, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been moments before with the other passengers.
"Yes, thank you," Marcus replies with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to such subtle shifts in treatment.
He accepts the towel with a polite nod, watching as Claire moves to the passenger seated behind him, her voice immediately brightening as she offers champagne and a warm welcome. Marcus returns his attention to his tablet, swiping to review the customer satisfaction metrics he had personally championed as vital indicators of the airline's performance. The irony isn't lost on him as he waits for his own pre-departure beverage, the one he had specifically ordered when booking his ticket. Just as he always did, 10 minutes pass. The remaining first-class passengers receive their drinks, including a middle-aged couple who boarded after Marcus and are now sipping from crystal flutes filled with bubbling champagne. Marcus closes his tablet and presses the call button, his finger lingering momentarily as he considers whether the small battle was worth fighting. With a silent exhale, he presses it firmly.
Claire returns, her expression tight.
"Yes, sir." "I believe I'm still waiting for my pre-departure beverage," Marcus says, his voice measured and professional.
"I pre-ordered the Macallan 18 when I booked my ticket."
"Oh," Claire responds, her eyes darting toward the galley.
"I'm not seeing that in our system. We're actually running low on premium beverages for this flight. I can offer you orange juice or water if you'd prefer."
Marcus glances past her shoulder, noting the fully stocked bar cart being prepared for service.
"That's unusual. I received a confirmation email specifically mentioning my beverage preference." He pulls up the email on his tablet and displays it to Claire.
"Perhaps you could double-check." "Sir, as I mentioned, we have limited stock today," Claire replies, her tone growing increasingly dismissive.
"The system sometimes overbooks certain items. I'll bring you some orange juice."
Before Marcus can respond, Claire has already turned away, leaving him watching as she whispers something to another flight attendant who glances in his direction with a barely concealed smirk. Marcus takes a deep breath and returns to his tablet, opening the communication app he used to stay in touch with his executive assistant, Jessica. He types a brief message, experiencing some interesting service discrepancies on Elite Flight 347. Might be nothing, but make a note to discuss with Diane in HR when I return. The captain's voice comes over the intercom, announcing their imminent departure and thanking passengers for choosing Elite Airways. Marcus returns his seat to the upright position and stows his tablet, watching as Claire distributes warm, mixed nuts to the passengers around him. When she reaches his row, she places a small packet of pretzels on his tray table, the kind typically served in economy class, before continuing her rounds. Marcus examines the sealed package with a clinical detachment that belies the slow burn of realization forming in his gut. This wasn't merely poor service or an oversight. The pattern was becoming unmistakable. As the plane begins to taxi toward the runway, Marcus reopens his messaging app and sends Jessica another text. On second thought, please contact Diane immediately. I want to know if there have been any other service complaints filed by minority passengers in first class over the past quarter. And remind me, when did we install the cabin surveillance system in the premium cabins? The response comes quickly. System went live 3 months ago across the entire fleet. All footage stored for 30 days. Should I be concerned? Marcus watches as Claire and another flight attendant disappear behind the galley curtain. Their hushed laughter drifting back to the cabin. Not yet, he types. But stay close to your phone. I may need you to make some calls before we land. The aircraft accelerates down the runway, and Marcus feels the familiar pressure against his chest as they ascend into the clouds. What should have been the beginning of a peaceful 6-hour flight was quickly transforming into something else entirely. A test of patience, professionalism, and principles that would have consequences far beyond this journey from New York to San Francisco. The seatbelt sign dims with a soft chime as the aircraft reaches cruising altitude, prompting the cabin crew to begin their service preparations. Marcus Reynolds closes his eyes briefly, recalling the board meeting just 3 years ago when he had proposed a substantial investment in Elite Airways. His fellow board members at Reynolds Technologies had questioned the wisdom of diversifying into air travel. But Marcus had seen an opportunity to transform an industry plagued by declining service standards and increasing customer dissatisfaction. The silent partnership had been strategic, allowing him to observe operations honestly while implementing changes from within the boardroom. Jessica's response illuminates his tablet screen. HR records show 17 formal complaints from minority passengers in first class over the past year. 5 specifically mentioning flight attendant Claire Wilson. 3 were dismissed for insufficient evidence and 2 resulted in customer vouchers but no disciplinary action. Surveillance system is fully operational on your aircraft. Diane is standing by for your call. Marcus acknowledges the message with a quick tap, feeling a familiar weight settle across his shoulders. The burden of proof always seemed heavier for some than others. He tucks the tablet into his jacket pocket as Claire approaches with the meal cart, her practiced smile reappearing as she serves the passenger across the aisle. Mr. Whitman, we have your special order ready. The seared salmon with truffle risotto and a glass of the Montrachet you requested. Chef's compliments, she says, carefully arranging the white china plate before the silver-haired gentleman. The aroma of the gourmet meal wafts through the cabin as Claire continues serving each passenger with attentive care. Marcus watches the ritual unfold, noting how she leans in to explain the wine pairing to a young couple, how she remembers another passenger's preference for extra bread. When she finally reaches his seat, Claire's demeanor shifts subtly as she places a covered plate before him without meeting his eyes. Your meal, she states flatly, already turning away. Marcus lifts the dome to find a dry sandwich on visibly stale bread, a small cup of lukewarm apple juice placed beside it. The contrast between his meal and those around him is stark enough to draw curious glances from nearby passengers. Excuse me, Marcus calls, his voice calm, but firm enough to halt Claire's retreat. I believe there's been a mistake with my meal. I pre-ordered the chef's special when I booked this flight. Claire turns back, her expression carefully neutral. I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have any record of that order. We're serving what's available. That's interesting, Marcus replies, retrieving his phone to display his confirmation email. Because I have the confirmation right here along with your system's acknowledgement of my dietary preferences and meal selection. Claire barely glances at the screen.
As I explained earlier about your beverage, our system sometimes both words and actions. Marcus nods, glancing out the window as the Denver landscape begins to recede beneath them. It seemed appropriate. Some lessons need to be expensive to be remembered. $10,000 per passenger is more than expensive, Whitman observes. That's a corporate statement, if I ever saw one. The money isn't the point, Marcus replies quietly. What matters is that everyone on this aircraft now has a stake in this story. Not just as witnesses, but as participants. They'll remember this flight not because of the discrimination they saw, but because of the accountability that followed. Whitman considers this, nodding slowly. You're playing a longer game than just addressing one incident. I have to, Marcus says, watching the clouds envelop the aircraft as they climb toward cruising altitude. Because this was never just about one flight, one crew, or one airline. It's about challenging the assumption that certain spaces aren't meant for people who look like me, and the casual cruelty that enforces those boundaries. As the aircraft levels off and the cabin service resumes, now delivered with impeccable professionalism by the replacement crew, Marcus opens his tablet to begin drafting the presentation he would deliver to the board the following morning. The surveillance footage provides irrefutable evidence of individual misconduct. But his task now is to illuminate the broader patterns that had enabled such behavior to flourish unchecked. His phone vibrates with an incoming call from the board chairman, Robert Chen. Marcus answers, prepared for the difficult conversation ahead. Marcus, Chen begins without preamble. I've just reviewed the preliminary reports and footage. It's disturbing to say the least. That's putting it mildly, Marcus replies, keeping his voice low despite the ambient noise of the cabin. The financial impact of your compensation offer will be substantial. The board will have questions. Marcus had anticipated this concern. The financial cost of allowing this culture to persist would be far greater in the long run. Lost customers, lawsuits, reputation damage. Consider this an investment in the company's future, not an expense. There is a brief silence on the line as Chen processes this perspective. You've never been one to make impulsive decisions, so I trust your judgment here. But what happens next? This incident will be headline news by morning. That's precisely why our response needs to be equally newsworthy, Marcus explains. I'm preparing a comprehensive proposal for systemic reforms throughout the airline, new training protocols, accountability mechanisms, and revised hiring practices. I'll present it to the board tomorrow morning. Some members will resist, Chen warns. They'll argue this was an isolated incident, not a systemic issue. Then I'll show them the data, Marcus counters firmly. 17 formal complaints from minority passengers in first class over the past year. Most dismissed without proper investigation. That's not isolated. That's a pattern. Chen sighs, the sound of someone recognizing the magnitude of the challenge ahead. You have my support, Marcus. This isn't just the right thing to do morally. It's the right business decision. I'll see you at the emergency board meeting tomorrow. As Marcus ends the call, he notices several passengers around him openly checking their banking apps. Exclamations of surprise confirming that the promised compensation is already being processed. Diane had worked quickly, ensuring that the corporate response matched the urgency of the situation. It was a promising start, but merely the first step in a much longer journey. The remainder of the flight proceeds without incident, the replacement crew demonstrating the standard of service that Marcus had always envisioned for Elite Airways. Professional, attentive, and most importantly, consistent for every passenger, regardless of appearance. As they begin their descent into San Francisco, Marcus finalizes his notes for the board presentation, knowing that tomorrow will be a defining moment, not just for his role in the company, but for the company's future itself. The Elite Airways response team awaits Marcus as he deplanes in San Francisco. The gravity of the situation evident in their expressions. James Peterson, the chief operating officer, steps forward immediately. Marcus, I've reviewed the footage. It's inexcusable, James says, extending his hand. Yes, it is, Marcus replies firmly. And now we need to ensure it never happens again. The chairman's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow at 8.
This story is already breaking across every platform. Inside the executive terminal, analysts have assembled a command center displaying data from customer feedback systems. A young data scientist points to a screen showing customer satisfaction metrics. We've identified a clear statistical disparity in satisfaction scores between white passengers and passengers of color in premium cabins, she explains, highlighting several graphs, particularly on routes staffed by certain crew rotations. And how many of these discrepancies triggered investigations? Marcus asks. Diane steps forward. Very few. Our systems classified complaints as isolated incidents unless multiple reports targeted the same employee within a narrow time frame. Or perhaps, Marcus says pointedly, it was designed precisely not to identify those patterns. James winces. The surveillance system you implemented has revealed discrepancies we simply couldn't see before. Couldn't or wouldn't? Marcus challenges. Systems reflect priorities, James. And our priority now needs to be accountability, not damage control. Which is why I've already initiated a comprehensive audit of all discrimination complaints received over the past 5 years, Diane interjects, including those dismissed at intake. A notification appears on the main screen showing statements from Claire and Captain Hoffman claiming misunderstanding and suggesting Marcus had leveraged his position for retribution. The lead counsel approaches, tablet in hand. The compensation package is making headlines, $10 million total. The board will have questions. They can question the cost of addressing this incident, Marcus replies. Or they can consider the much higher cost of ignoring it. Marcus steps away to call Jessica in New York. The footage has been completely backed up, right? He asks. Triple secured, Jessica confirms. Copies with our servers, the legal team, and your private cloud. It can't disappear. Good, because tomorrow is when the real work begins. Today was about addressing an incident. Tomorrow is about changing a system. Robert Chen's message appears on Marcus' phone. Media requests pouring in. They want statements, interviews. How do you want to handle? No interviews yet, Marcus replies after consideration. Issue a statement acknowledging the incident, confirming immediate action was taken, and announcing comprehensive reforms to be presented tomorrow. Keep the focus on systemic change, not personal drama. A middle-aged black executive approaches Marcus, lowering her voice. I've been with this airline 20 years. What happened to you has happened to countless others who couldn't fight back. Thank you for using your position to force this conversation. This isn't just my fight, Marcus responds, meeting her gaze. And the changes we make can't just be about protecting executives in first class. She nods. The board won't make this easy. Some will try to minimize it, contain the damage rather than address the cause. Then we'll need to make the evidence impossible to ignore, Marcus says. Tomorrow isn't just about one flight or one crew. It's about acknowledging a reality that's been hidden in plain sight for far too long. As the response team continues their preparations, Marcus surveys the command center with its screens displaying social media reactions, news coverage, and internal data. The incident has forced a long overdue reckoning, but the fact that it had required such dramatic circumstances to prompt action is itself an indictment of how deeply entrenched the problems were. James, Marcus calls across the room, I want to see complete service records for every crew member who received discrimination complaints in the past 5 years, and I want to know exactly how those complaints were handled, who reviewed them, and what actions were taken. That's hundreds of files, James protests. Then we better get started, Marcus replies without hesitation. Because tomorrow the board gets every single one. The Elite Airways boardroom falls silent as Marcus concludes his presentation. The evidence of systemic discrimination laid bare before the assembled executives. The surveillance footage from the flight plays one final time on the main screen. Claire's contemptuous expression, Captain Hoffman's baseless accusations, and the explicit racial comments captured behind the galley curtain. Gentlemen, ladies, Marcus says, his voice steady as he surveys the board members' reactions. What we witnessed wasn't an isolated incident, but a manifestation of deeper cultural problems within our organization. The audit has identified 78 similar complaints that were dismissed without proper investigation over the past 3 years. Charles Whitfield, a senior board member with 30 years in the industry, leans